Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anvita and today I'm going to be talking about my March TBR in general, but also specific to International Women's Day, which is today. And so yeah, let's begin. So I briefly mentioned this in my February wrap up, but I ended up buying more books than reading in February, and so I'm going on another book buying ban, and this time it won't be just for the month, it'll be an indefinite one, so I can like lessen my physical TBR because it's over 70 books right now, and I need to bring it down to at least 30 or 35 by the end of the year. So I'm gonna do this thing where for every 5 physical books that I read, I can buy a book. Or like, let's see how it goes for that, because if I make it 10 for every, no, 1 for every 10 books, then I feel like I'm gonna lose motivation and just not read. So I'm gonna try and make it for every 5 books I can buy a book. And so this month's TBR is mostly all physical TBR, and I've already read 2 books. It's March 5th today when I'm recording, and I've already finished 2 books, which is great for me, and they were both my physical TBR, so I'm really proud of that, and I'm excited to read more of the books I have so I can, celebrate with buying another book. I mean, obviously, I feel like even once I hit like the 5 book mark, I'm still gonna be like, maybe I can hold off and like buy it later. Because then if I hit 10 books, then I can buy 2 books at the same time, which will feel much nicer. So let's see. I'm done with 2 books for now, and I have 3 books that I've decided I'm gonna read this month. So I hope I can get through them and yeah, make that number from 70 to 60 something at least, because right now it's I think 72 or 74 books that I haven't read, which is terrifying. So yeah, so that's my spiel on my book buying ban and the state of my physical TBR. So yeah, anyways, now on to my TBR for March. I have decided, so I've been trying to get back into book journaling, and but like very little and very simplistic, just like I don't have that much time to like actually make elaborate spreads and stuff, but I have been trying to go back into it a little bit, and so I made a little bit of a spread for my March TBR, basically having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books that I for sure want to read in March and hopefully get through. And out of these, 2 of them are library books that I got finally on Libby, and then one of them is a book that I was sent an ARC for, and the 2 others are rereads. So I'll just go through them. First and foremost, I want to show you guys the books that I specifically want to read for, Women's Day, Women's Month. And so, to start off, my first book in March, which I've already finished, was Pachinko by Minjin Lee. I started this in February, but I knew I wasn't going to finish before it was already March, because I started this to prepare myself for the show that's coming out on March 25th, which I'm really looking forward to. I just watched the trailer after finishing the book, and I'm so excited. Like, this book was so good. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I'll talk about it more in my March wrap up, but yeah, it was so good, and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see how they go about the book in the show. But in terms of International Women's Day and International Women's Month, I wanted to read this specifically just because it highlights so much about, the women in all the generations, and like the main character of this book, Sanja, and like, yeah, it's just so good, and it highlights so much like cultural and historical background about Koreans in Japan. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and it was so good, and I highly recommend reading it and watching the show. I think usually, obviously, the books are much better than the shows. So, and but like obviously I haven't seen it yet since it hasn't come out, so I don't know if I can make that judgment yet. But I honestly can say this book was really good, and even if you're planning on watching the show, I would highly recommend reading this first because it was really good, really well written, and yeah, just so good. Yeah. Okay. The second book in March that I read and already finished, that was also for International Women's Day, was Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I have read two other works by Rachel Lynn Solomon, and I love them both, The X-Doc and We Can't Keep Meeting Like This. And this book was the best one I've read out of all of her works. Like, look how many times I've tabbed it. I'll talk about it more in my March wrap up, but yeah, this book was great, and it highlighted a lot about women in a very specific way that I could relate to as well, in terms of women with mental illness and stuff. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was really relatable and really well done. So yeah, this was the second book in my March TBR for International Women's Day. The third book for International Women's Day that I had started last year but ended up not reading more of till now was Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. I have read about this much of the book, which is like a little less than half. I've read, I think, the first, let's see, okay, I've read the first 4 stories and there are 5 stories left. So I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the stories because it highlights people in the Indian diaspora and like, you know, Indians living in exile and stuff. And yeah, so this was the third book. This is the third book on my TBR for International Women's Day, and I am almost halfway through, and I'm hoping I can read the rest of the stories and finish this book this month. So yeah. Okay. The fourth and the last book in my International Women's Day TBR is I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. I've had this book for 2 years and I still haven't read it. I did start it almost a year ago, over a year ago, and like I've read 34 pages, but I wasn't in the mood for it then, so I stopped. But I'm really looking forward to it, and I want to read more of Alice Oseman's work. I have 2 other books by her that I've already bought without reading any of her other works, so I'm looking forward to going through her backlist, starting with this one. So yeah, I'm excited for this. I'm excited to get back into this world. So besides that, so that was all the books that I wanted to read for International Women's Day that are also in my physical TBR. So the 2 books that I'm planning on rereading in March are the second and the third book for Cruel Prince. I reread Cruel Prince last month and absolutely loved it. So the first time I'd read the Cruel Prince series, like the Folk of the Air series, I read it last year in May, and I read it on my iPad, and so I'd gotten the books in physical copy because I loved it so much, and now I'm like rereading it, and I read the first one in February, and so now I want to read the second and the third one this month and, you know, finish annotating the books. So yeah. So besides the 2 books that I'm rereading, the Folk of the Air series books, I also got 2 of my library hauls which finally came through. And so on Libby, I'm reading Supernova right now by Marissa Mayer, which is the 3rd book in the Renegade series, and I'm absolutely loving it, and way more compared to the first 2 books, which is insane because I honestly wasn't sure at first if I was going to even read the 3rd book after finishing those 2, because I wasn't sure if I was actually liking it or if I was just like binge reading it, and like the last part of both books were great, so I kept continuing. But like, yeah, I wasn't sure if I was liking it, and then but this book is so good. Like the third book, definitely the best one for now. So yeah, I hope the ending lives up to it, and yeah, let's see. And then the second book that I got through Libby was Our Violent Ends, and I'm so excited to read it. I read the first one, These Violent Delights, last March, so a year later. I'm really excited and hoping to finish both CDs in March. So yeah, really looking forward to both those books. So yeah, that was all the books that I've either already finished in March or I'm planning on reading in March for International Women's Day, but also just in general. And yeah, I'm excited. I feel like this is going to be a really productive reading month for me since I've already finished 2 books and it's only 5th March. So fingers crossed. I hope I get through a lot of my physical TBR this month and get to celebrate and buy more books. JK, I'm gonna try and not and just like keep my list, because there are still some books that I'd ordered in February that haven't come, which will count as books that I'm getting in March. So yeah, I know there are like at least 3 books that I'm waiting on, and I don't know when they're gonna come. So yeah, so let's see how many books I end up reading and how much I can reduce my TBR to in March. So yeah, see you guys with updates in my March wrap up, hopefully with some good news. So yeah, okay, bye.